Thank you very much. We're going to move, actually stay partly in ag, but also manufacturing and consumer products. Please join me in welcoming the Senior Vice President, Product Development and Sourcing at Levi Strauss & Company, Liz O'Neill. Liz, hey, welcome. Fashionably dressed as always. Yeah. Talk a little bit about your role. What do you do at Levi Strauss & Company?
So I run product development and sourcing for the company for all of the things that go on the bottom half of your body. And in that role, I have the team in San Francisco that works with the design team to help create the products, and as well as the overseas teams that work directly with the factories that actually manufacture the goods and get them back into the country. And in addition to that, we also have an innovation team that's working on solving all of the problems, whether it's for our customers or in the sustainability field as well, in terms of making our products better for the customer or just making them better in general.
Yeah. One of the things that I find really remarkable about Levi's, and I've watched the company for well over 20 years, is how you've really aligned sustainability and innovation. Mm-hmm. That's not different departments. In fact, your job is really at that intersection around understanding the life cycle of Para 501s, what is better cotton, and knowing that those really big impacts are growing cotton and washing jeans. How do you then address them? Things, neither of which you directly control. You don't grow cotton, obviously, and you're not in the home laundering business. Mm-hmm. So. I think it's really remarkable. How did that happen, first of all? How did you integrate those so well?
Well, I think that the structure at Levi's is actually very fortunate that the sustainability team and the product development and sourcing team are actually all part of the supply chain and come into one leader who has a very balanced approach. I think that sets us up for success right away. And then I view my role within product development and sourcing as a good place to try to find those ways to integrate sustainability into everything that we do. So how do you get sustainability across your supply chain, from soup to nuts, like you said? Where can we have the impact? We can have the impact on cotton, we can have the impact on water, and we can have the impact on the workers. We don't directly control any of those things, but in the supply chain seat, in the sourcing seat, you have the influence over the people that can control it, i.e. the suppliers. So that's a great way to start to scale those ideas. And where you need some help in the innovation field, where those ideas are not readily scalable, that's where you can use your innovation team to actually problem solve those ideas for you.
Where do you report in?
Into the head of supply chain.
And where does the sustainability team, Michael Kabori and his team?
We share a boss.
Okay, so
yes.
you are connected at the
exactly.
hip there.
Exactly.
One of the things that that impressed me, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you here was you're saying, and I think Levi's believing that product level innovations are a lot harder than systems level innovations when it comes to sustainability. Talk about that.
I think what we're trying to do now is stay far away from the shiny penny approach, because those can be very resource intensive from a team point of view.
What does that mean, the shiny penny kind of thing?
We want to sell this product to our customers and we want to be able to label it that it was made to absolute sustainable perfection, right? So that garment is very difficult to make, and it takes a lot of resources to come up with that idea and to figure out how to embed it within the supply chain. But if you step back and say, we can have an impact more broadly across the supply chain if we're not focused just on that product, if we're focused more at the supplier level and more at the input level, then we can actually have a much greater impact and we can get there much more quickly.
So give us an example.
So improving worker well-being. So this is a program, it's been mentioned before by previous speakers. This is a factory-based, NGO-supported worker education program that focuses on health and financial literacy. So that's something that can scale quickly. We've had 5 factories that have been piloted for the last 2 years, and now we're on a path to roll this out to all of our key suppliers. So by 2020, our goal is to have 80% of all of our products made in a worker well-being qualified factory. And I feel comfortable with that goal as part of the supply chain because that creates value. And that's a key thing for sustainability. It has to create value in order to be able to scale. With worker well-being, we know that the benefits of that program are you have lower attrition rates, you have lower absenteeism, which leads to higher productivity. So that's a beautiful thing. So if you can show that you're creating value, then you don't have to have mutually exclusive goals between the sustainability group and the supply chain group, because it works together.
I imagine lower defects as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you do label things. Those is waterless jeans, not waterless, but water-less. So somehow you do manage to bring those together. Water is an interesting piece of this because, as you learn and know so well, that the water impacts are, again, grown cotton and washing jeans, and yet you've decided to label the manufacturing part, which isn't necessarily. So talk about what's going on there and why you've chosen that to be consumer-facing.
So that one is consumer-facing. I think water is one of the bigger issues that people are more aware of, and it is that the manufacturing of denim can be water intense. We've put a lot of effort into reducing the amount of water that goes into that manufacturing process. We don't always label them. In fact, we've made about 75 million garments waterless so far. A tiny portion of those have actually been labeled. So we're actually trying to make sure that we're scaling the waterless. And my job is not to make sure that it gets labeled. My job is to make sure we do as many waterless pairs of jeans as we possibly can. And again, that's another one where waterless creates value. It's not difficult for me to sign up to that sustainability initiative because it actually costs less to manufacture waterless, anywhere from 5 cents to 50 cents. So, if you can help your suppliers understand how to make those innovations, it actually works for them as well. It controls their costs as well, and it has a benefit to our consumers at the end of the road.
So you make it sound easy. It's not.
It's not. No.
Tell us a little bit about working with the suppliers. I mean, how do you, when you're launching a new innovation, how do you pick which suppliers to work with? Are there some go-to suppliers that are particularly, or factories that are particularly innovation friendly, if you will, or do you pick is there a low-hanging fruit aspect?
Yep.
How do you do that?
There absolutely are. I mean, suppliers come in all different shapes and sizes. We're changing the conversation with our suppliers right now to be, in any supply chain role, and if you're a supplier, you're going to have cost goals, you're going to have quality goals, you're going to have speed to market goals, and we're adding on sustainability as the fourth of equal footing in that group. So if you're going to be a key Levi's supplier, you have to be leading on sustainability. Now, we know we may need to help you in some cases. We may need to fit the right programs with the right vendors so that there is value creation, but all of our suppliers are going to need to be leading on innovation going forward. Sorry? Now, of course, you do have suppliers that are well above the rest in terms of how innovative they are and how innovative they are in sustainability. We definitely have a group of those suppliers, and we welcome them into Levi's. At our Eureka Innovation Lab, we host vendors very frequently to have discussions about how do we innovate? How do we problem solve this? If we want to do fabric waterless, because that's the next generation of waterless, how do we do that, and how do we engineer it so that it is cost neutral so that it can be scaled? So we welcome them. Some of them are hiring, some of the best and brightest to try to figure these things out too. So we don't believe that we have all the answers. We're definitely looking to our suppliers to help us with that as well. And some of those cream of the crop help get us there more quickly. But baseline across the entire supply base will be leading on sustainability.
One of the things I hear a lot from big companies is that they're really not that big. Whether it's McDonald's and 1 to 2% of beef purchasing, where in any country where they do business, or a Nike or an Apple, for as big as they are, not being sufficiently big to drive the market, to drive the vendor practices. How do you get to do that?
Well, Levi's is big in the market. It's actually a great seat to sit in because we do have a lot of influence. And I've been with the company about 1.5 years, and it took me a few months to recognize how big Levi's is to denim, how big Dockers is to non-denim. We do control a lot of the market share. So we have the luxury of choosing which suppliers we want to work with. We have the luxury of asking those suppliers to partner with us. And that allows us to actually influence more broadly across the supply chain. And some of our suppliers, in the ways that they're innovative, they start to show that value creation, and they can evangelize some of those programs within their communities. So whether the supplier actually works with Levi's or not, they may hear through peer references about different programs and start to adopt them because of the value creation message.
I would imagine that there's some trepidations around. Levi's is such an iconic brand, along the lines of an Apple or a Nike, of tinkering with success. In making too many changes and maybe messaging things. I know there's a lot of companies here that have shied away from sort of green marketing because by pointing out what they're doing right, that often illuminates problems that the public didn't even know they had.
Sure.
And how do you think about that, particularly in the messaging to consumers?
I'm mostly focused on making progress, right? I'm focused on making progress and trying not to get, one foot nailed to the floor in terms of how are we going to tell the customers. Definitely rely on our marketing folks to help with that. But I want to make sure that by the time the customer really, really wants to hear about all of these things, we've made so much progress, whether it's water, cotton, workers, that there are plenty of messages to tell. So we're just trying to keep on pushing forward. And we have some pretty lofty goals, from Michael and his team that we're driving towards. But as long as we keep creating the value and we keep focusing on the supplier base and helping them move along the path, then I think, by the time we want to figure out what our message is to the consumers more broadly, it'll be about progress overall, and we'll have plenty of good talking points.
Do you get pushback from consumers, from activists, from any? I don't see a lot of it, but I'm wondering what you're hearing.
Supply chains are not perfect. They never are. But we're trying to make progress around it. We certainly have had our moments with Greenpeace, et cetera, but they push us in the right direction.
What do they push you on? Can you tell us?
We get pushed on water, we get pushed on workers' rights, we get, in any supply chain, these are very common factors. Levi's is a big, American iconic brand, so we expect to get that pushback. And again, we just continue to try to make progress in all of the places where we can have impact, right? So we know where we can have impact, and we're trying to move as quickly as we can to improve things in those arenas.
Yeah. Talk about growing cotton, because cotton, I think, is not that well understood as one of the really hardest crops to grow in terms of water, pesticides, fertilizers, and the resulting runoffs and the impacts that have on worker health and safety and the birds in the trees. There's a lot going on there, and that is your principal product. In fact, at one point I think we're the largest cotton buyer in the world. Now you're probably in the top 5 or so. How are you transforming that industry?
So we're focusing on better cotton primarily. We do buy some organic, but really as a scalable approach, better cotton is the good avenue. And
And that's a certification. What is better cotton?
Better cotton is cotton that is grown in a both socially and environmentally improved way.
But there is an actual standard or something around that you can say this is better cotton?
Yes. So the cotton supply chain is actually quite complicated, and it moves through a lot of different hands. But when our fabric mills go to buy better cotton, whether they're buying the yarn from the spinner or whether they're buying the actual cotton because they're spinning their own, they do get a certification that says this is better cotton, and it is tracked. So we're scaling with better cotton. We're going to be about 10% of our total purchases this year will be through better cotton. And we're looking at places where better cotton is in big supply, like in South Asia. We do a lot of manufacturing in South Asia, and better cotton is readily available there. So we've decided to increase our penetration targets for 2015 in that region as a result. So we're trying to keep an eye on where these things are giving us different opportunities and push forward even further if we can.
Yeah, I'm going to get to some questions in a second, but what are you struggling with? What are the sort of intractable issues that you really wish you could solve, but seem to not be as solvable as some of the others?
I think fabric's going to be our big challenge. I think that our customers.
Is that cotton specifically?
It's not really cotton. It's actually, what are the different ways that you can impact fabric beyond cotton? So it could be the waterless innovation. It could be closed loop. How do we get more recycled into our fabrics? That's a big area of opportunity that right now is not cost neutral. So it's not that efficient to do closed loop yet. But that's where we're trying to use our innovation group to say, if we're going to develop a new fabric, let's develop it conventionally, let's develop it with waterless technology, and let's develop it with some kind of a closed loop philosophy in mind. And let's try to see if we can engineer that product along the way so that it is cost neutral and it does qualify in one of those areas instead of just putting another conventional fabric out there.
When you talk about closing the loop, you're talking about consumers So this is
Returning.
Patagonia has tried this with it and is doing
Yep.
this with its I forget what
Yep.
it's called Rethreads or something. I can't remember the name of the program. How would you do that? How would you take back jeans?
Well, there are companies actually that do take back jeans. They take back jeans all over the world, and they supply those goods back to you. So it's really what you do with them once you get them back, and how do you work with your suppliers to say, okay, here's a big mountain of jeans. Let's figure out how to get them spun back into usable yarn. So it is possible to do right now, but I think you're not seeing it as much because it's not scalable. So I'm sort of fiercely protective of the resources that I have on my team to go after some of these ideas. Closed loop is something that's going to be extremely important. It's going to be important to Levi's. It's going to be important to a lot of different retailers. But trying to figure out how to get it scalable before we really go into it, up to our shoulders is sort of what we're grappling with right now.
It's common threads is the Patagonia. Someone just whispered in my earpiece, I guess. I don't know. Lauren, what do we have? Questions?
Yeah, we've gotten a couple questions about sort of ensuring that suppliers are following through with sustainability commitments. Wondering if that can be done through surveys versus audits or in-person Levi's staff visits.
We do have people that are on the ground in our factories that are watching and making sure that our sustainability standards are being met. We are trying to move beyond compliance. It's important to have your suppliers invested in this journey. So we're trying to get out of the moment of monitoring every little thing, but we're trying to focus on those key suppliers, fewer suppliers, better partners, where monitoring is not really the conversation anymore. It's how much progress can you make. We have some of these people come into our innovation lab and they just blow us away. So we've really kind of moved out of the monitoring phase and more into the how much more progress can we make.
I know that a lot of the garment and apparel companies have brought in, have worked together on monitoring. Is that part of what's going on? I haven't heard about that for a number of years. Is that just sort of business as usual now?
It is, and we, whether it's a formalized program or, we certainly we share vendors with a number of other retailers. If something's happening in a factory and it doesn't look quite right, or if somebody's going, there's an open line of communication between the sustainability team within Levi's and certainly the sustainability teams within other brands as well to make sure that we're sharing information.
Great. Lauren?
Gotten a couple of questions about people who are a little envious maybe of Levi's position as such a big player in the market, as you were saying. Any advice you would give to companies that maybe are a little smaller and looking for effective ways to sort of build their influence?
Yeah, I think the key for me is focus on where you can have impact, right? So don't get yourself spread out too much. Even if you're a small company, there's going to be something where you can have impact. So focus on where you can have impact, and then make sure you're finding a way to do it that creates value. Because if you can't create value, if you're asking your supplier to do something that's going to make them slower, make them cost more, make them less agile, impact their product quality, it's going to be really hard to scale. But if you can create that value, and so you're not in conflict anywhere, then you can scale very quickly. And it doesn't have to become a push-pull. It can be an and instead of an either-or.
I think we have time for at least one more question.
Yeah, and the last sort of thread that we've picked up on is related to technology and supply chains. We've gotten a couple questions about sensors that can maybe be used to make monitoring more efficient or those types of things. Anything you'd mention on that front in terms of what's coming down the pike?
Some suppliers that are starting to look at software that they can put onto the industrial washing machines that will literally calculate for you and can give you a sort of a net green result at the end. What's your total impact? And that's water, that's chemicals, that's how much steam did you use, how long was it in there, how much energy. So that can really give you an idea of how much total energy you're using. So those things are coming up. The software, I saw a presentation for one a few weeks ago. Very interesting. And I think, again, those were expensive and difficult to implement a few years ago, but now we're starting to see some of those that are actually a little bit easier. It's really something you put on the machine, and you have the software on your computer, and you can actually get a very good idea of where you're impacting and where you actually need to make more progress.
Well, lots more threads, as it were, about that we could be talking about here. But it's really remarkable, and I continue to be in awe of how you've managed to bring this all together and make it, I hate to say this, seamless within the company. This came out, sorry. But, you know, talk about a company where sustainability is in its genes. Please join me in thanking Liz O'Neill. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.